Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great session after lunch, our RDA outputs and recommendations plenary session. Just for those of you who I haven't met in the last 2 days, I'm Shalini Kurapati. I represent the Global Research Data Alliance, the Secretariat. And I'm working as a community engagement specialist. And some of you might have heard my email or seen my emails about the artificial intelligence workshops and the report. So I'm very excited to be working on these topics and others in the coming weeks. I also I work on this part-time, but I am also an entrepreneur. I have an AI company working on trustworthy AI. So without further ado, we are going to start today's session, and we're going to talk about the outputs and recommendations of the RDA. And we're going to have it in a slightly different format than usual. It's not going to be presentations, but we're going to have a very nice chat over here. We don't have a fireplace, but it's cozy enough, I think. So basically, the idea is to focus on the adoption and impact of the brilliant community that you are. And it will be engaging and accessible. So we'll be talking about things so all of us can follow. And actually, just a quick, tidbit is the fireside chat format was started by Roosevelt in the 1930s, the American president, just to engage with the public with informal sessions over the radio. And it had then evolved into a Q&A interview style conference format. So we'd love to start that. And our agenda today is quite exciting. We're going to start our first chat with our very own Hilary Hanahu, the brilliant Secretary General of the Research Data Alliance, to talk a little bit about the impact of RDA itself in addition to the groups. And then we have 5 excellent groups to present about their output. The way we selected these groups was by assessing their impact and their adoption and outputs in the recent year. And we are really excited that all the co-chairs representing these 5 groups are here. And additionally, we also have the RDA Tiger and Tigress programs, which are not part of the group, but we will spotlight on them as well. So starting with Hilary. So I'm just going to present a background slide for each of these speakers and groups. So if you wish to dig in more into their work, there's a QR code, you can always go. So I'm just going to sit down, Hilary, and I'll probably pass on the mic when I have to ask you. Just if you had to say a year in review, what would be the key updates that you want to give? We heard from you this morning, it was more of a vision statement, but we would love to hear a little bit about what are the key updates that you feel proud of?
Well, thanks, Shalini. There's a really bad feedback sitting up here, so bear with me, but the sound is pretty bad. But I hope you can hear us online. I always like to distinguish 2 aspects of the Research Data Alliance, the work and the business, because of course, the work is everything that is done here at the plenaries and by the community all throughout the year and the time of RDA. But the business is the piece actually that supports the work. And one does not work without another. And sometimes I show it as this sort of circle together, but it's a way in which I break it up. So I think that if I were to talk about the work of RDA, which is really, enthusiastic, and I love talking about the work. We have all these outputs and recommendations that came out this year, but you're going to hear about a lot of them now, so I won't go into that. We continue to grow as members. We have many active groups, and that's always very important. And what I often look at, because numbers are numbers, but when we have a plenary meeting, the thing that excites me most is the number of birds of a feather, because the birds of a feather in RDA are where new ideas can come up and where the community comes together to decide whether it should or should not indeed take forward the work. So I think in that perspective, that's from the work of RDA, from the business of RDA. They bring back the microphone for the rest of you. So less of a fireside chat. Sorry, Shalini. I think, yeah, I mean, from a perspective of the work or the business aspect, we have the web platform. I think you've been communicated sufficiently about that during the year, so I'll skip over. But the strategic plan, which was like a big piece of work, and we're in almost at the end of the first year of that. I spent 5 weeks in Latin America to raise awareness of RDA. It's the start of a journey, I hope. This is another, if you like, phase or step on that journey. But yeah, and we hope to increase the visibility and the membership in Latin America as we go, forward. So, but like with all things, they're slow, but and steady.
We have the mic again.
It's back
Yes,
again.
it's back
Oh, yes,
again.
great.
Sorry. So Hilary, like we talked about, the impact of the community and their outputs and everything and all these, and you talked about your scars, but I want to touch upon one point in terms of challenges, because I'm not going to talk about the web platform, of course. I'm talking about other long-term challenges that you foresee for this important community, and what are your plans on, and I wouldn't just put it on you as RDA secretary, but also call upon the community to, emphasize that.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. I think I've been involved in the Research Data Alliance since its launch in 2013. I've been in this role since 2018. And it's always a challenge, because an open infrastructure or an open initiative like RDA is challenging to find models to sustain it. And so while we have much support from some regions and organizations across the globe, it's challenging to identify models that can support. So I think I would like the community to do two things. One is that you do great work, but we don't always know about the impact of that work or the adoption. I came across, maybe this is for the next question, so I'll segue into it, but I came across a really, by chance, a story of, or a paper with the fair data maturity model used as the basis for the research. Just recently, the fair data maturity model was published in 2020, So it's really wonderful, but that being able to show the value of RDA and the impact is something that we as the business of RDA try to do, but we need your help because it's very broad and there's lots going on. And the second thing is financial sustainability. And you see that on the bottom corner of the slide. So we are starting work now, again, which is important for an organization like RDA to periodically look into the different models and the landscape within which it sits, yes, to see what are the models for sustainability and things. We believe that RDA is more valid now than perhaps it was even 11 years ago for many different reasons. But of course, this requires we need to maintain the organization. So I think if I were to say, and in an upbeat way, yeah, it's really valuable the work you're doing. So we need help to make sure that people know that.
Great, Hilary. And I see in the impact you mentioned artificial intelligence, sustainable development goals, and we're going to be talking about it also later on. I see a little koala on your lanyard. So just to conclude on a positive note, just a couple of minutes on what do you see, about going forward, not just, of course, P25, but also what do you foresee for the next year and years?
Thanks, Shalini. So, of course, apart from plenaries, which I'll end with, next year, one of the things that we think is important is actually, so RDA, as you know, is a bottom-up organization. You're the people that decide what we work on. But we feel that there are areas of the landscape that where research data can provide very important results and support. And we think, therefore, it is time to maybe do some calls to the community. So we're going to start working out how that could happen. What are the activities that we think would be good to focus on, and then we'll see how the community reacts to that. That might mean some injection of new components into our plenary meetings to, change a little bit. We also would like to pursue the standards route. It's not something we pursued a few years ago, but we ended up having to stop it. But we would like to start it again because we believe that that's important. That could mean not necessarily producing our own standards, but facilitating the standards process. And then I must end with, of course, the fact that these new updates and these activities, we hope you will see them first during the week of the next fully virtual plenary meeting, which is the 7th to the 11th of April at different times in different time zones. We're doing it for a week this time as a result of the feedback we received from the community. And then, of course, where's Rosie? Rosie's there. And all her colleagues from ARDC, from the 13th to the 16th of October 2025, the plenary will be at IDW in Brisbane, hence the koala. And I'll stop with that and let the others tell you more important things about their wonderful outputs. And thanks, Shalini.
Thank you so much, Hilary. A big round of applause for our Secretary General, Hilary Hanahu. Thank you very much. And I am very excited to start talking about the outputs and recommendations of the heart of the RDA community, the groups. And of course, I would like to invite on stage Florencia Grattarola, who is the co-chair of the Sharing Rewards and Credit Interest Group, which is called SHARC, a very nice thing. And Florencia, you decided to speak in Spanish, didn't you? So I'm going to wear my I have to keep my on. Yeah, perfect. And I listen to you. So your group is about to unpack and improving credit, recognition of research rewards for doing open science, more or less. So, and you've been working on this interest group. Do you want to share, tell us a little bit about your key outputs that your group has produced?
Buenas, gracias, Shalini. Va a ser difícil pensar en inglés y en español, pero espero que salga bien. Bueno, con Shark hemos estado trabajando en dos cosas últimamente. Una de ellas es un trabajo que se hizo en base a una encuesta y que explora las brechas que hay entre las actividades de ciencia abierta que existen hoy y los sistemas de reconocimiento que actualmente están en diferentes partes del mundo. Y por otro lado, un poco basándonos en ese trabajo, también generamos un conjunto de recomendaciones para incentivos y Hello. Bueno, un conjunto de recomendaciones que apunta a las múltiples partes interesadas en la ciencia, como son los investigadores, las investigadoras, las instituciones de investigación, financiadores, editoras y los responsables de las políticas gubernamentales. También el documento aporta algunas cosas sobre políticas existentes, herramientas y iniciativas en diferentes partes del mundo, y les invito a escanear el código QR para encontrar nuestras recomendaciones.
That's great, Flo. And I wanted to ask you something, like, adoption, obviously you can have a quantitative numbers, right? Number of downloads or adoptions, but could you also give us a bit more like a community anecdote or an experience that you say, hey, I'm so glad I'm doing this work. So could you talk us a little bit through your adoption impact, both quantitative and qualitative, that says, I'm so glad I'm doing this?
Wow, Shalini is taller than me. Bueno, nuestras recomendaciones todavía recién fueron aprobadas por la comunidad de RDA, así que todavía no tenemos personas o instituciones que hayan adoptado nuestras recomendaciones, pero bueno, creo que vienen en un momento que es crucial, en el que se está discutiendo un montón sobre la reforma, en la forma que evaluamos los investigadores y las investigadoras, y creemos que para hacer esto es muy importante también apuntar a los incentivos que hay para que las personas, los financiadores, las editoras, se sumen también a este camino de ciencia abierta. Es como el cuello de botella que vemos. Y bueno, como todavía no tenemos personas e instituciones que hayan adoptado nuestras recomendaciones, estamos buscándoles, así que si están interesadas, pónganse en contacto con nosotros.
Of course, you're talking about the apt time. It's the correct time. And also we heard it in the keynote this morning, how important it is to also recognize, because why am I sharing data, right? So given this importance and the need for credit, recognition, what would be your, based on your experience, what lessons have you learned and how are you moving forward?
Bueno, creo que destacamos la importancia de contar con un grupo que es multidisciplinario, que cuenta con personas que participan de distintas partes del mundo y de distintas disciplinas, y creemos que esto es importante para considerar que es un incentivo en distintas culturas y contextos, y eso nos resulta algo que fue interesante descubrir, que no para todos es lo mismo, lo que significa una recompensa. Y bueno, y creemos que si bien hay una gran variación de iniciativas, encontramos también que la gran mayoría de las cosas que hay funcionando o lo que las prácticas de ciencia abierta en distintas instituciones, universidades, la gran mayoría aún no cuentan con esquemas de incentivos, si bien sí se cuenta con programas, estrategias de ciencia abierta, muy buenas cosas funcionando, aún nos falta en todo el mundo, en particular en distintas regiones, pero es algo generalizable, digamos, es que faltan esquemas de incentivo, así que eso es algo que también aprendimos, no son muchos.
That's a great conclusion, Flo, because and especially talking about the multi-stakeholder, multicultural approach, and we are here and so glad that you did this speech in Spanish. So thank you very much. A big round of applause for Florencia Grattarola, co-chair of the Sharing Rewards and Credit Interest Group. And it is my pleasure to introduce Lisa Letsalu, who represents the Professionalizing Data Stewardship Interest Group, who work on data stewardship as a service and try to promote data stewardship as a profession, which is extremely important in the current landscape that we are talking about. So welcome, Lisa. Please take a seat. Let's hope the mic works. Otherwise, we can always take a little walk on the stage. So great. So let's start with your key outputs that your group has produced, and they are excellent. I read them, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you, Shalini, and third time lucky on the couch, hopefully. So professionalizing data stewardship, we are looking at data stewardship from two perspectives. One is from the perspective of data stewardship as a service, and the second one is data stewardship as a profession. And the two outputs represent those two work tracks. So we have a survey report that looked at current models of data stewardship, where we did a global survey, had 136 respondents that we retained for analysis, and got kind of like a landscape view of what types of data stewardship services exist, how they are composed, what type of services they include, and so on. And then we did another survey where we surveyed professionals who take on the role of data stewardship. and surveyed. We had over 200 responses, retained 241, and put together this initial report that looked at data steward career tracks, basically. I want to say that for both of those, data is available. Please go and dig through. I think there's lots of stuff in there that we didn't get to analyze, but we would want to invite the community to look into.
That's excellent. And moving on, I looked at all the adoption and impact that you've had so far, which is quite tangible from what I see. Do you want to share something on also the use of your adoptions for policymakers, which seems to be the case?
Yeah, we had a good opportunity to collaborate in Europe with the European Open Science Cloud task force on data stewardship curricula and career paths. So for those of you who are familiar with the EOSC, this is from their previous period of activity. They actually used our career tracks data and integrated it into their report. So this way, this one RDA output found its way into EOSC outputs and EOSC recommendations to the Commission. There is now funding call coming out of you in Europe around data steward career paths. Whether we had an impact on it, I cannot say for sure. I like to think so, but who knows? But I think it's in the spirit of RDA to collaborate and find the stakeholders and involve them, and this is how also impact can come. Although I have to say, as you see from my lessons learned, that tracking this adoption is very, very difficult.
I understand. Quantitative metrics are one thing, but could you share with us like one inspiring anecdote in your work that you have done because careers are quite a crucial component also to make. Also this morning we talked about time or money. We need to also put more money into this endeavor. So any inspiring story to share?
I'm on a spotlight now and I don't know inspiring stories. No, but I think what's actually inspiring are the conversations that the Professionalizing Data Stewardship interest group keeps on having around the work that we're doing. And seeing that those outputs, they do reflect the concerns and issues in this field. And that just this morning, we talked about data stewards and how it's very difficult to identify who data stewards are. It's at the organizational level, it's very difficult to identify what is a data stewardship service, because in one organization it's one thing, in another organization it's another thing. So how do you even talk about this? How do you compare services? How do you compare who is a data steward in one organization to who is a data steward in another? So it's those conversations that I think are interesting, important, and most inspiring, because it just highlights that there's so much work that still needs to happen.
No, definitely. Just to also wrap up, this also very much comes to the challenges that you had mentioned in your lessons learned in terms of, different countries having different perspectives and the lack of shared vocabularies in this field, like you had just mentioned. What is a data steward, right? So since RDA is a global community, so how are you going forward trying to, are there any pathways, or are you thinking of any, future work on this topic?
So yes, we are continuing our activity both within the interest group, and the interest group is in the process of hopefully spinning a working group focusing on data steward career tracks. Come to our POF tomorrow afternoon. And in terms of having a global conversation, I think that is our greatest challenge, actually. And over the last 3 years, we have had very many conversations within the interest group about how we can have a global conversation about data stewardship. And this has actually taken us back to a conclusion that maybe we cannot have a global conversation about data stewardship because the term data stewardship is not global and data stewards are not global. But you know, you have the QR code there. If you're somebody who works in a role that involves data stewardship activities, please come and join the interest group and you know, help us brainstorm how we can make this work more global. We have been quite European focused, and we want to break out of this, quite honest.
That's a great message to end. Like, come join us. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Lisa. Lisa, a big round of applause. Thank you. And our next group, I would like to, can you please move this? Why is this not working? Oh, yes. I would like to invite CJ Woodford, who is one of the co-chairs of Global Open Research Commons Interest Group, GORC. CJ, welcome. And GORC is an interest group that provides space for neutral conversations on open research commons, and it's aimed to support coordination among commons to enable globally interoperable resources for research. I'm just reading out of the slide because just to save you some time so that you can spend more time on the outputs and people can look at the QR code if they want to know more about your group, right? So take a seat, CJ. Welcome. Anywhere. Yeah. Okay. So let's. Can you run us through your key outputs that you had mentioned in the slide?
Yeah. So thank you for coming to the plenary, of course, and letting me talk about the GORC interest group. The GORC interest group does have a spun up working group. So shout out to the PDS interest group that having a working group work alongside you is really great. So do that. The key outputs that we have from the interest group side are the typology and definitions, which was where we introduced essential elements of a commons, and then was the foundation for what the working group took and ran off with, which was the international commons model. And this was coming back towards the goal of the interest group of how do you actually get to a global open research commons? What is the roadmap to get there? The first thing we had to identify was what are the considerations that research commons would need to consider or potentially implement to even think about being in a global infrastructure or collaboration or commons in this case. So those are our two main outputs. And yeah.
I mean, it's an interest group, so you've been around for a while doing the work on GORC, right? How long is have you been working on it, and what are your main impact stories that you want to share with us? No, the reason why I said you've been around is that you've been around with RDA for a long time, not just GORC.
Well, actually, I haven't been around RDA all that long. So I am now a co-chair of the GORC interest group, but I started as a co-chair of the working group. So the interest group has been around for a while, something like 2016, 2017, I believe. The working group was around since about 2019, and then I joined as a co-chair in 2022. So
Share some of, I mean, the impact stories, yes, along these years, yeah.
So along these years, the impact story, sorry, I missed the second half of the question. Where we're really starting to see impact is when we first spun up the working group, or when I first joined and we started moving things forward in 2022, and especially in 2023. The plenary in Gothenburg was when we first got that shout out from Carol Goebel, actually, who said, we need this right now. So thank you for starting this work. It looks like trash at the moment because it was a draft. But that was the first impact, to have someone actually in the audience of a plenary session saying, we really need this right now. I need you to make it open right now. I need you to make it public right now, not just within the working group as an intermediate. Like, it needs to be actually available to the community immediately for immediate use, even as a draft. So that was a big one. When we actually have these outputs ready, which they were the typology definitions came out last year in 2023. The version 1.1 is a recommendation that was endorsed only a few days ago. So that's available out on Zenodo now. But we now are seeing, now that we've got more formalized outputs to showcase, there are adopters and there are people that are talking to each other and seeing where the benefit is in using them. So big ones are the adoption cases that led to version 1.1 of the international model being a recommendation. So shout out to Reason, which is a proposed research commons for Norway, and SURF, which is a national commons in the Netherlands.
That's great. And what about the informal adopters that you're talking about? Because maybe those haven't been like, documented or like highlighted, but those are as important that your work is having real world impact. Do you want to share a couple of, words on that?
I can. I'm a little nervous to do so because I appreciate that informal adoption means that you're not ready to say like, we are rubber stamping that we are using this particular output. But we have heard through conversation and folks saying it to us and saying like, we really appreciate this work, or this is how we're using it, or do you have recommendations for how to implement so and so? We know that Elixir is looking at using the Gork model and already using it in some of their commons infrastructure within Elixir, which is interesting. So building on this concept we're trying to move forward with, which is a commons of a commons or a system of systems. We know that it's being used in a couple other places and also being looked at from national funders like NSF, NFDI. We've seen some use with their interest in using it, as well as from Biofair in the UK. So informal adoption in the way of like, we don't know how much has been adopted, or there's no like report that came out of it, but people are talking about it and we know that it's of interest to the wider community, which is a big impact for us. It means we can get to keep going.
Oh, that's excellent. I'm going to ask you again if you have any anecdote that you want to share in these informal conversations that really, it's inspiring for you to continue the work, which is great. Like hearing you so passionate about this group is also very inspiring. So do you have anything to share on this qualitative feedback that you have received on the group?
Yeah, I'd say in terms of qualitative feedback or anecdotes, the one thing that really jumped out to me about the Reason adoption story is that because it's a proposed infrastructure, it hasn't actually like occurred. But where it was adopted in their case was in the funding proposal writing, which was a very detailed down into the details document from my understanding. And the feedback we got from that big time was that without the Gork model being there for them to write that funding proposal, they would not have, they probably wouldn't have actually submitted on time because the timeline for them to write that was very short. And they felt that it wasn't going to be nearly as good of a proposal if they didn't have that resource and they didn't full on adopt the model as part of their funding proposal writing. So that was a big one to say, like, this is actually really helpful in practice with people doing real things like applying for money.
No, that's absolutely inspiring because it has real impact and people are benefiting from your work. So that's brilliant. And that's the whole spirit of open science as well. So in your whole process, you've done excellent work and you want to tell us a little bit about what worked and what were the challenges that you faced?
Sure. So I'm going to start with maybe the challenges, because then that means I don't have to end on the challenges. So challenges for us were kind of the visibility of the outputs, people knowing that this framework was there. This has been a conversation that's happened in other sessions so far during the plenary, is knowing what all the stuff is that's relevant to you, being able to find it and parse it and then read it all and then figure out what's relevant. So making sure that the Gork model is positioned as something that you can start with, and then there's recommendations in there that you can dive into more details with afterwards. And then a big one that is a key challenge is it's not user friendliness. It's currently an Excel sheet, which is great for content, but it's not great for user interface or experience. So that's a big challenge for us. It means that it's harder to adopt. But in terms of what worked, maybe just going a little bit backwards, is I do want to do a shout out for RDA Tiger. The Gork working group in particular was supported by RDA Tiger. And I wanted to bring this up to showcase that they created a little pamphlet all about the Gork outputs. So I have a stack of them if you want one. They're pretty cool. And it showcases a little bit of what RDA Tiger can do in a very short amount of time with only support for communications. So if you've got more RDA Tiger support, then you get to do even more. We've also found that having a task group structure was really good in our working group to have the outputs kind of be socialized in their own organizations first, as well as to build on that global perspectives and context. So everyone was able to bring in something, and we were able to kind of modularize the work, and everyone got to have a say in various parts that they were most interested in or most familiar with. And the last thing I wanted to mention is having dedicated full-time staff to working groups is obviously hard. We keep coming back to this idea of funding and money and people, and yes, but the GORC interest model working group actually got to do that. And that was me. So having a full-time person working in a working group moved everything forward very quickly from where it was before. And it means that we got to kind of start with more work that hasn't actually been published yet. So wink, wink, more to come. But that's a big one, actually having dedicated folks, not just necessarily to the facilitation and coordination of the working group, which is very helpful, but also dedicated to the content creation and the work itself. So get your infrastructures to fund people.
No, that's a great message to give to everybody, and everybody agrees, obviously. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your future? You know, what's next for the interest group and future plans? Yeah.
Yeah, well, in classic interest group way, it's going to continue and continue to be like a space for conversations around research commons and identifying maybe what will go into this framework a little bit more now that we've got a model that says what might you consider. The next piece, more so tangibly, is to spin up a second working group. So our breakout 2 session this afternoon with the combined GORC working group and interest group session will be the last meeting for the GORC International Model Working Group and the showcasing of the case statement for GORC 2 working group, where we'll take the model as it is, continue to work on it and make additions, but more so dive into what does a profile of the model look like? And so the implementations on all those considerations, about 400 of them in the model currently. So it's a little bit more easy to use, and you have examples to draw on as well.
Thank you very much, CJ. That was very insightful, and well done for the great work for you. I mean, not just applause for CJ and also the GORC working group and interest group as well. Thank you, CJ. Right. So this is so inspiring to hear all the impact and adoption stories. And then let's continue with again. Oh yeah, there we are. I would like to invite Brigitte Matiak, co-chair of the Data Discovery Paradigms Interest Group, one of the co-chairs, right? One of the co-chairs. Welcome, Brigitte. And since I could not, maybe you can introduce your group already as well, because I didn't introduce your group. Maybe take a seat and start with introducing your group.
Yeah, hello. So I'm Brigitte Matiak. I'm one of 4 co-chairs of the Data Discovery Paradigms Interest Group. There's Uwe over there, Ming. Yeah, over there, and Fotis couldn't make it, so that's us. Yeah, so I haven't been in the group since the beginning, so you probably have to ask me for a historical breakdown of what everything happened. So when I joined, I had a basically research interest in data discovery. So I thought, okay, this is the place for me. And I think it's one of the older groups to be honest. So there has been lots of inputs. And what we do is we regularly try to put in like the newest state of the art, the newest recommendations, and put them into outputs. And these are like the 2 key outputs that we have there.
Great. So you say addressing the F in the FAIR data. That's kind of your mission, obviously. I didn't want to read that out also. But talking about that, can you talk about the 10 principles publication that you had to improve dataset discoverability, and also the 11 quick tips? What's up with the 10 and the 11? I'm just curious.
Okay, so data discovery, obviously, it goes into findability, and there are, different myths and different ideas on how to search for data and how to find data. And there are, two different coins. One of them is, I am the person who wants to find data and I want to know how to do it. And the other one is, oh, I have data and I want other people to be able to find that data. And that is the twin output that we have there. The 11 quick tips for finding research data is the one where you can go if you want to find data, and the 10 principles. And however many they are, it's well, I think since we are people who try to optimize findability, having a number in your title makes it more clickbaity. In case you didn't know, there are studies about that. And so that's why we always do that.
Okay. Can you quickly also tell us, like, what I mean, a summary of these principles? Like, what should you do to find your data properly?
Just read the paper. It's 10 of them. I mean, it's they're different aspects. I think the most important one is that you make that an actual goal. Like, there are so many people who have a lot of data, but they don't ever think about whether or not it's findable or not. And the other thing is that you need to understand that findability, it's not a binary. It's not like you're findable or you're not findable. It's a scale, right? You know, like maybe your data is findable if I know exactly what I'm looking for and if I don't misspell it or anything like that. And then if I enter the correct alphanumeric code and the correct database, then I will find your data. So in principle, it's findable. But on the other hand, you have stuff where you can you just type something into Google and suddenly your data set appears, and that's what I'm talking about. I mean, there are the different degrees of findability, and this is something that is a continuous process that can always be, like, you can always be more findable. There's no upper limit to it. I think that's maybe the most important thing. And then what you should do about it to make your data better findable is something that's then, of course, the next step is to read the 10 principles.
No, sounds good. No, looks like your outputs also have some quantifiable metrics, that you have a number of people downloading them, and especially the 2018 paper seems to be that you have quite an impressive number of views. And the numbers probably might not tell the whole story, but did you also interact with people who have downloaded the paper and used it and got the feedback about it?
Yeah, so I tend to, include the 10 principles or something else in my slides when I go around. I'm very active in the German NFDI, and also RDA Germany invited me to give a talk about the 10 principles. So yeah, it's going around. A lot of people talk about it. It's always interesting to hear about people. What are people doing? Because it's very different, and that's why we came up with 10 principles, not just 2, because there are different strategies that you can go into, and it also it really depends on what kind of audience you have. I mean, I think it's the first principle is know the people that want to find your data. Yeah, so I always get a lot of positive feedback when I talk to people about how this really reframed the thinking about the topic.
I mean, also about the adopters. Who are your adopters? How would you define them? Are they researchers or libraries, or who? I mean, do you have any insights on that?
Well, we have 2 different target groups. One of them are the people who are trying to find data, and 28,000 looked at that. So I would hope that they found something useful there. And then, of course, the other audience, the people who have a search engine, for example, or Commons, there are a lot less people, but I think the impact is significantly more, significantly bigger. And yeah, so I think that that this is something very interesting, also because it's really like a changing topic. Like we in our session this afternoon, which is going to be great, by the way, please stop by. We will talk about AI and how many people have now really started to pivot from looking. I mean, in the old days, people would look, in libraries, and then they started looking in the literature, and then they started, pivoting to Google, and now they're pivoting to AI, like they're asking ChatGPT. And so we always have to be on our toes to be where people are looking for us. And I think that makes this a very interesting thing, and it will remain interesting for the foreseeable future.
That's great. And do you want to tell us a little bit about, like, obviously it's a question for everybody, what were both the, when you're working towards building these outputs, you learn a lot, and you want to also share that with the community so that, they borrow the good things and also not repeat the same mistakes. So what would be your lessons learned and some kind of message to the community as well?
Well, I think the main lesson I want to give you guys is that it's worthwhile. Like, we applied these principles, we quadrupled our users. And not just on paper, but like actually the download numbers, everything just went up. I don't think this is a zero-sum game. It doesn't mean that because Jesus is having more users, you are having less. I don't believe that. I think this is something that the more we work together to make this something that is present in the global competition of data. Oh.
Can you just describe GASES for those who don't know what it is?
Oh, okay, sorry. So GASES is we have a social science repository. So we have social science data, and we obviously want people to find and reuse that data. And I don't think it's a competition between us, the people in this room. I think it's a competition between science and other sources of information that are out there that are just not that good. And I think we should all work together to kind of like be more prominent, so people, because I mean, the alternatives are either the people use data that is not scientific, which is bad, I think, or they are, rebuilding that same data and not reusing it. And I think that's bad too. And so I think the goal should be that we all work together to make our data more visible.
So about your future plans, is it going to be 12 tips for AI in data discovery?
Actually, that doesn't sound too bad. You should join the group and provide some. So usually when we start with these principles, we start with 5. and then we go through several iterations, and it comes out at slightly higher numbers. So that's how that happens. But yeah, I think having 12, actually, I think it's like a countdown. So 9 principles for AI search or something like that. Yeah, that sounds about right. Let's talk about it again in 2 years.
So thank you so much, Brigitte. Very nice to have you on stage and talking about your group's outputs. Thank you. And now we have another exciting group, which is again, sorry, it's not giving me these movies. I would like to, anyway, welcome Natalie Mayers, who is the co-chair of the Artificial Intelligence and Data Visitation Group. I hope I can change my slide. Sorry very much about that. Okay, slide change. On, it's on. Okay, there we are. It takes a little bit of time. So I was just trying to get to your slide, Natalie. So I'll actually let you introduce your group yourself, because so that, I couldn't get to the slide in time. So welcome. Great to have you here. So just a few lines about your group.
I'd like to introduce you all to the Artificial Intelligence and Data Visitation Working Group. It's been a real pleasure to work with these 106 people from all over the world. That helps us to keep track of the rapidly evolving AI governance and regulatory landscape about artificial intelligence and data visitation that's impacting all of us in our everyday lives and in our working lives.
That's great to hear, Natalie. And obviously, all of us have heard so much about AI in these days. Everybody is mentioning AI, and the work you're doing, especially on the ethics and the policy, and also the data sharing, the security of AI data for AI, it's so impactful. And can you just, there are a lot of outputs that you've produced, and that's exciting. And it's for a working group, like you're working on a short amount of time. So could you just, tell us what you have done?
Sure, it's my pleasure. I'd like to tell you a little bit. We formed 4 sub-teams early, and these 4 sub-teams each had different remits. One sub-team, which I participated on, was the AI Bill of Rights recommendation group. Our remit was to look at the evolving landscape of AI governance and report back to the European Open Science Cloud project and to the RDA membership, all of us here, about what that landscape looks like. So you'll see in our output about 7 pages of what we would like to call adoptable recommendation, and then literally a scissors icon and about 70 additional pages showing you globally, regionally, nationally, and at the state and municipal level, what's happening around the world. And we found this out through the strength of that 106-person group and our sub-team membership that represented people who were working in each of these legal climates and in this very pluralistic policy environment. Our second group was working on guidance for institutional review boards and ethics committees who are reviewing AI and DV projects. And that guidance is of particular interest to anyone here who's ever served on an IRB or anyone who's had to put forward work to an ethics committee or an IRB before starting their project. What we're finding is that IRBs and ethics committees need a little bit different ancillary support in order to make good judgments about the projects in front of them, and that they also may have special considerations about AI that are governed by other legislation and policy than those they've looked at before related to privacy or data sharing and so on. We also had a group looking at guidance for informed consent in the context of AI and data visitation. Here, what we see is you'll find a terrific grid in the output that helps you locate yourself in your organization, both globally and within an academic or research setting. It's really terrific guidance to find your place and to determine whether you need to re-consent audiences in order to use AI in your project, or to think about how people are consented within your data inside an AI project. And finally, we have another group working on secured processing environments for AI and DV, and we expect that output to be available shortly.
Natalie, a very basic question before we move to the adoption. I mean, people are aware of artificial intelligence, even though the meaning is different for different people. But data visitation is not that a common of a word. Can you just explain what it is to those maybe might be interested?
Yes, and for those who attended our session this morning, thank you. And for those who have worked on this definition, thank you. Think of data visitation as a place where your algorithm can visit data that is held by a third party, and you permit algorithmic use of your data, and your data remains in situ. And then the algorithm that visits your data can return a result, but you haven't had to enter into a legal agreement that was file-based or individual-based. In other words, this can facilitate machine actionable data access or the activity of software visiting data like we see when we train AI models. So it's very important to think of data visitation as a way to ease data transfer agreements, a way to allow software to visit data without data moving in our cloud-based world, and a way for analytics to happen where the data lives rather than moving data about in a file-based way.
Okay, is it like something similar to federated learning? in terms of technology?
This is a good question. She asks, is it similar to federated learning? And the concepts share similarities. So in our output, Nana Bharathi from ARDC in Australia has added some nuance around that very question. And I invite you to visit the AI Bill of Rights output to dig into that nuance. There are some technical implications there, as well as some implications about how you provide secure processing environments, private processing environments, and how you do load sharing across who's accessing data when. So I encourage you to visit that and think about AI in the context of data visitation in that way. Not all federated learning is of necessity AI. Not all large language models are federated learning. I'm speaking to the choir here about these things, but yes.
No, just wanted to clarify that aspect. And when we had actually had a call for this, and I was impressed by the number of adopters already, given your length of the group. So could you also tell us? It's great. Please, I would love to listen.
I'm really pleased that Shalini has asked about this because it's difficult in a rapidly evolving legal and regulatory landscape for a issue like AI that is so broad and has so many different business, privacy, and human rights implications. To ask people to adopt something before it's been through council review. So we're really anticipating council review. And we thank everyone who participated during community review that strengthened each of these outputs you see on the slide. What we have so far is an adoption of the AI Bill of Rights by Kahi Institute. They are an AI law and society consultancy, and they knew right away, because of the way they were advising their clients on AI, that they needed something like our AI Bill of Rights and our responsible artificial intelligence guidelines to help their clients and to help them help their clients. In other words, to be able to walk the walk in terms of the data they govern themselves and the guidance they give their clients. We've also used these outputs in the Force 11 FISCI courses that take place in the summer, and that has been a way to introduce the publishing community to the impacts of AI and the right ways to handle AI as they're related to scientific publications. And our informed consent guidance, similarly, the way it delves into who you need to reconsent, what it might look like to have a processual way to do consent, have been informative for Kahi and others. And our shared citation library, which is available to all of us, and I invite you to use it, it contains not just the citations from each of these 4 outputs, but tagged by country, and tagged by topic, risk, for example, ethics, for example, education, generative AI, copyright. It helps you find your place to get a quick read informed by what all these 106 members are working on. So it's a great go-to place to get current. We've seen more adoptions of the shared library, but we anticipate that as a working group, as we ramp up and become more output adoption focused rather than output creation focused, that we will be able to come back with more impact stories about how adoption of these responsible AI recommendations, informed consent guidelines, and recommendations for ethics committees and IRBs become impactful within organizations and on individual researchers' lives, hopefully making them easier because you have something to go to quickly to do a read-in before you're asked to participate on the IRB in your organization, or perhaps it helps you ready yourself to review a vendor agreement. In any of those cases or anywhere on the spectrum in between, we invite you to visit the recommendations and to know that the members of our AIDV working group, our job now in this phase of our working group, in this end phase, are to help you implement, understand and discuss the outputs in your context. So we're really focused on your context next, what works, what doesn't, and what additional work needs to be done.
Absolutely. And it's so impactful, especially in the current landscape, because we looked, I mean, across all the groups, one of the challenges was the multi-stakeholder, different contexts, different countries. And now AI is also becoming a geopolitical issue. So it's so important that you're bringing all this together, because Europe is going one way, US probably another, China somewhere else. So I would really like to, end hopefully, and I'm an optimist, but so hopefully on a positive note. So what are your, let's say, future plans as well, given this landscape?
Our future plans among the membership in the AIDV working group are to continue to leverage the RDA working group and interest group structure. We've found that structure in combination with the biannual plenaries has really helped us keep pace with and stay mutually informed in this rapidly evolving landscape. We also have valued the way that RDA's membership open to all has uniquely positioned us to ask one another and work collaboratively together on this. We'll be extending this work into Quora ERIP. We'll be watching the digital trends interest group with great interest and participation among many from our group. And the FAIR and AI and FAIR model sharing is of great interest to us. We want model-driven research and large language model impacted science to benefit from our recommendations and to help all of us understand that though data is the background, the way software is accessing data now changes the hats we wear with greater frequency than maybe we're used to, but that's okay. There are a lot of us will figure it out.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie. That was a wonderful chat. So thank you. Thank you very much. And now we would like to have a spotlight on our European and American colleagues. I would like to invite on stage, sorry, this is going, sorry, yeah. Ryan O'Connor and Rob Quick. Ryan O'Connor from RDA Europe and Rob Quick from RDA US. Ryan, I did add the RDA to the Tiger, but that slide was not updated. I'm so sorry. So welcome, please have a seat. So you had already heard CJ mention RDA Tiger, Ryan. So that, I mean, you must have been happy to hear that. So could you, walk us through what is RDA Tiger?
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, so RDA Tiger is a bit of a gear change. So we've obviously heard so far from different groups and their work and their outputs. So RDA Tiger is a European Commission funded project. So we've been working for the last year and a bit. So it's running from 2023 to 2025. Basically, the remit is to support RDA working groups through their life cycle and to kind of sort of help them to improve the impact of their outputs and also kind of and the more sort of organizational aspects to kind of help support them through that. We do that through a couple of different services, through sort of in-kind support services, and also through the extension of financial support as well. So currently we have a Cascade grant open, and we also have a kind of rolling open call for any groups or any individuals even who have an idea for a working group, or any groups who have started up who want that little bit of extra support. They're free to apply for our open call procedure, and we can sort of address or assess their application from there.
Great. And since the start of your facilitation services, can you give us how many groups have you supported, and a few activities that highlighted your work? Yeah.
Yeah, so as it says there on the screen, so we've heard from a few of the groups already. So we've supported over 20 working groups so far. So that includes, as I said, that includes the in-kind sort of financial support, in-kind support, which is around the various different services such as facilitation service support we provide, and also through communications and landscape and engagement, and also support for outputs. And that includes then we have also a smaller number of groups who have benefited from the financial support, but that is sort of growing, and we're anticipating a lot more applications to that in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, that's great. And you also talk about a maintenance facility that is part of the project that you had talked about that has been funded. Do you want to say a couple of things about it?
Yeah, so I think just on the topic of impact, I guess. So we are one of the sort of a criteria that we use to assess whether or not we provide support to the groups would be the extent to which they sort of address specific EOS implementation. I think their implementation challenges is the correct phrase, or kind of areas of concern. So we've been supporting groups to that. So most of the groups we support will address some of these implementation challenges. For instance, metadata ontologies, the OSC interoperability framework, that type of thing. So these are the kind of more of the sort of more external sort of ways that we're helping to elaborate that impact that the RDA groups that we're supporting are having on the external environment. But as well as that, we're also producing some materials and tools and guidance that will be of benefit to internally to the RDA groups. So as I have on the slide here, we've developed this RDA knowledge graph essentially, which is we actually have a demo of this on one of our booths outside, and that's been developed by one of my colleagues, one of the consortium partners at DANCE. Essentially, that is a sort of a knowledge graph, which is kind of mapping all the different aspects of RDA outputs and all compiling all the information, allowing. It's in the early stages yet, but it also allows users to query that and to kind of pull out information. We're also producing other various bits of guidance, such as just kind of guidance for co-chairs and kind of welcome packs for RDA, for new RDA groups, and sort of guidance for people who are providing sort of facilitation or similar types of support to groups. So we're hoping that will have a bit of an impact on the actual sort of internal operations of RDA working groups in future.
Oh, that's great. And we also saw an example of the communication activities as well that even CJ brought it to the stage. It's also a European project, but it's also open to everybody. We talk about that. But however, going forward, how do you see RDA or Tiger evolve and the next steps for the future?
Yeah, so as I said, yeah, that's a good point. Actually, should reiterate that even though there's a European Commission funded project, we are supporting groups whose co-chairs and whose membership is dispersed all across the globe. So we do keep in accordance with the RDA sort of rules of participation in that sense as well. In terms of the future, yeah, so I guess the main thing for us from the project perspective is we do have those rolling open calls. So we are encouraging people to get in touch with us and to apply for support, either in-kind support or financial support. So that will be ongoing. But what we're really focusing on now in the next, I guess, 13 months will be around this sort of further sort of elaborating the impact that RDA working groups are having on EOSC environments and their wider communities. So we actually have an upcoming series of webinars on this, which are starting at the end of this month. There's information on the website on that. So if you scan the QR code or come to the booth that we have, please ask us any questions. So we'll be doing that. We'll also be producing a white paper type on the landscape, on that current landscape as well. We're also producing support for standardization, and we have a sort of, as Hilary mentioned earlier, that is quite a large topic, and as I'm sure people who have pursued that in their capacity or in their capacity as group co-chairs or further afield, that's obviously quite a big aspect. But what we're doing with Tiger is maybe providing support for that sort of pre-standardization work. So we have some guidance around that, and we also have some sort of supplementary support that we've been provided by a separate project. And the final point then, actually, we'll be looking to develop in the next 12 months or so, developing this facilitation specifically, which is one of the services we provide, but developing that as a kind of standalone service that will be provided by RDA Europe, but it will be available to not just RDA groups, but anyone else who similar type initiatives, task forces, interest groups, that type of thing, who might benefit from that, and we'll be able to provide those services to them. So that's kind of really what's ahead for us for the next 12 months or so.
So thank you so much, Ryan. That was a Well done for all the great work to you and your team. And that was from RDA Europe. And moving on to the RDA US, Rob Quick, would you like to, tell us a little bit about, should I say Tiger US or Tigress? Go ahead.
So sure. So Tigris is a kind of a baby tiger at this point. It's a pilot program that we're just starting out. We're funding, or we're working with a few working groups, but we're really focused on working group outputs from the RDA that are relevant to U.S. researchers. Then we'll help them move the process along. So basically, it's taking the RDA outputs that we identify and moving towards the adoption in the U.S. We take any working groups that from the very beginning, the startup phase through the end phase. In fact, the two projects we're working with currently have already completed their RDA working group, but we're then adjusting the products to be adopted in the U.S. And most importantly here, Tigris is really formed on Tiger, on their structure, on their processes. So we're trying to emulate them as much as possible, and we work together in many ways. We have regular collaborative meetings to be sure that we are serving the overall RDA together and not necessarily in a competition type fashion.
That's great. And in terms of the work you've also been doing, I mean, you mentioned the national PID strategy, and that's a very important topic. And do you want to share some insights on that?
Sure. So we've been working with the two people, actually, John Tedecki and Todd Carpenter in the U.S., who are really trying to move forward this PID strategy. So the Tigris Group itself did several things with the U.S. PID strategy group. It started with helping format and disseminate a document called Developing a National PID Strategy in the U.S. We helped get that product out. After that, we were able to we worked through the endorsement process through RDA US with RDA US, the steering committee endorsing the document that was produced. Then we created a video series that provided short, consumable video content based on that document. So if somebody wanted to see what was happening in that with the development of that PID strategy, they could go to a YouTube video, watch a short video, and see the components of that document and scan either pieces or the full thing through that document. And then finally, and where we're at now is we started up a joint RDA US and NISO working group. So we're working with them to inform the NISO working group that is moving towards from a strategy towards a standardization of some of the recommendations there.
Definitely. And standardization seemed to be a common theme also across the all group. So that's also great that we are all working towards similar goals. And in terms of, you were saying that Tigris is a pilot program, but how do you see, going forward? How would that look like, and what are your plans and, ideas?
Sure. So right now, I think we're helping out some working groups, providing some information. Really, the idea is to work through this pilot program, find some sustainable way to continue the program into the future, to grow the program. Eventually, we would not like to necessarily be a baby tiger, but a baby sister tiger, right? So really right now it is getting information, gathering information, getting a few of these working group facilitations under our belt, and then turning that into something that we think would be fundable to do this at a larger scale and continually into the future.
Thank you so much, Ryan and Rob. A big round of applause to both of them. Please don't leave, stay here. So, because, of course, we heard a lot, but it's important to also have some interactions with co-chairs. So I would invite all the co-chairs that had presented to come back on stage. So we'll have a joint Q&A. Florencia, Natalie, is Brigitte around? Yes. Just take this away. I will probably run around with the mic a little bit, probably. Okay, good. We have another mic over there. So we'll start with the questions on stage. Bridget, if I would ask you also to monitor if there are any questions from the chat, I will ask you to ask. Okay, excellent. So let's start with the live audience, I mean, the in-person audience. Any questions or comments for our wonderful co-chairs and our RDA Europe and US representatives? Questions, comments? We have a question there? Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. My question is a bit hypothetical, but if you had endless money and endless time, what is one really specific thing you would do that you think would have the most impact on the work that you do?
Do you have a specific person for the question?
Just, yeah, anyone.
Who wants
wherever.
to take this question? Unlimited money. Okay, everybody gets a very 30-second answer. 30-second, less than 30 seconds. Go ahead, Brigitte.
Early retirement.
I would get on that train.
I'm actually going to answer the question. I think just from the Tiger perspective, I think we've had a lot of positive feedback. That's one of the things we do is constantly kind of seek feedback. We're very needy that way. But a lot of the feedback we've had is essentially saying, thanks to the support, we'd like more of it. So if we could have endless pot of funding and time and resource to hire more people, then we would absolutely do that. Just provide more of the same, basically.
Yeah, so I think I would move to Costa Rica and work remotely from here. No, but to seriously answer that question, I think I would see Tigris as being our Tiger and Tigris being a thing that was offered to every working group and maybe even every interest group. So not limited to the ones that we have the amount of effort to work with. So I could see that being an across the board RDA offering to a new interest group to have a facilitator work with you during the project, or work with the chairs during the project.
Should do in Spanish. Bueno, creo que financiaría a muchas universidades e institutos de América Latina para que pudieran estar acá y que también pudieran conversar y estar en la conversación que se está dando. Should I say it?
A global tour of in-person workshops.
It's a really good one. I should have thought of that. Probably for our groups in particular, having more working groups operating in parallel as opposed to doing like one at a time because everyone's limited time and capacity, and having RDA Tiger support for all of them, as well as a full dedicated person for each of them too. So really leaning on that money and time thing.
Fantastic. Other questions, comments? There's one, yeah.
Well, I have a specific question about artificial intelligence group and data visitation. And I'm in particularly interested in the informed consent work that you are doing. Can you elaborate? What are you actually doing in this respect? Like how are you trying to apply artificial intelligence for the informed consent?
Thank you for that question. I'll repeat it to make sure I understand it well. The question in general was, what are we doing specifically to describe the use of artificial intelligence with informed consent? And in our case, our guidance isn't about using artificial intelligence to perform informed consent. It's about getting informed consent for the persons whose data is present in the data that AI are trained on, or the persons whose data is output by AI, whose privacy may or may not be protected in terms of reuse or reconsumption by other AI. That is where the guidance is focused now. I would invite you to speak with Gautier Chesang, who is here and worked on this group. Gautier, if you're here, give us a wave. And also to key in on Gautier's phrase of processual consent rather than a one-time consent, that it might be time to do consent more than once, for more than one data use.
Just also to have a shout out to our online attendees. Do we have any questions from the online attendees, Bridget, that we have to address? Not yet. We have time for 2 more questions then. Other comments, questions to our, there is one over there at the back. Yeah.
Hi, this isn't a question. This is my thanks and gratitude. Many of you on the stage, I've had the privilege to work with. The support from Tiger, Tigress, CJ, all of you, thank you. You are making us possible to be able to do all the things we want to do. I encourage everybody in the audience, reach out, learn how you can connect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, questions? Sorry, there's a question at the back.
Hi, everyone. I was wondering if you could comment really briefly on the evolution of these outputs for those of you who have outputs out there. Because really, I know a lot of folks are thinking about sustainability. And given that the areas many of you are working with are constantly changing, I'm curious if you're thinking of this as a, here's our version for now, and we'll come back together in a year or two, or if it's going to be constantly evolving.
So it's a great question to, all of you. So let's start with Brigitte.
Oh my God, I have to go first again. Yeah, serious answer. I think I think that's why I'm glad we're not doing a working group, but an interest group that we can revisit our outputs from time to time, especially since our topic's really evolving a lot, and we really have to keep track of not only the changing landscape of what exists, but also the changing technology and also the changing state of the art. So yeah, I think that I'm not going to say that the output is outdated the second it hits Zenodo. It's not quite as bad as that, but it's I think it's pretty clear that these things have to be constantly updated in the future. And maybe that's something I would want to do if I get unlimited time and money at some point.
Yeah, that is a great thing we could do if we got that unlimited time and money. The title of our artificial intelligence data visitation working group breakout session this morning was the relevance of our guidelines in the rapidly evolving landscape. So I really appreciate the question. It's something we've been self-questioning about during the lifetime of the working group. And it's something that we've tried to build into each of the outputs so that they have an enactable or actionable component and an informational component, with the notion that the informational components may age, but the actionable components will be true or actionable at any time, and that the working group may need to revisit those and may need to add additional guidelines or recommendations, but that we need to be quite clear about what's for now and what has informed what's for now.
Coincido con quienes hablaron hasta ahora, porque creo que sí hay una parte que es un poco viva, un documento vivo en cierto sentido, porque se va adaptando a cosas que al menos para nosotros incluso nos tomó un par de años dar las recomendaciones, y en ese tiempo surgieron nuevas iniciativas, nuevas herramientas, nuevas políticas. Pero sin embargo creo que con lo que hay hasta ahora y lo que vemos a futuro son el mejor set de recomendaciones que podemos dar al momento.
So we're looking at the sustainability from the perspective of continuing to work on the outputs. So we take them as the basis of next step in our work. and build on them. In one case, looking into so the survey on data stewardship service models, we're looking into creating a repository of actual service use cases. So build on the general models to have actual examples for the community. And in the case of data stewardship career tracks, I mentioned that we are trying to spin a working group. So we keep working on the outputs ourselves and hope that also others do the same. That's why we have put the data out there so that everybody can build on them.
Echoing what other co-chairs have already said, but highlighting that RDA requires you to have a maintenance plan for recommendations and outputs at this stage. So it's something that you definitely have to think about. And as Lisa's already mentioned, just continuing to work on them. And in our case, being very clear that like the version number is in the title. We are by no means starting at version 1.1. What a terrible number to stop at. So the idea being that the intention is to continue to expand further, incorporate more things that have been published in the time from when you started to when you submitted that particular version, and update it as technology evolves, but then also as the ecosystems evolve too. So definitely part of the work.
So thank you very much. We are exactly on time. So thank you so much, everyone, Brigitte, Natalie, Ryan, Rob, Florencia, Lise, and CJ. Big round of applause, and thank you all for your interest. So that's our plenary sessions on outputs and recommendations. Thank you again for all your work, also reflecting so take a bow. Thank you.